68.
48-hour art check, round 68. Yes, round 68.
All right. Yes.
So
Here we are.
approaching 70.
I know, it's crazy. We're going to have to start looking for, senior discounts, like, discounted apartment rates
Yeah.
at, places that have bingo nights.
Yeah. So if you guys are watching this, make sure to share it so we can get a lot of conversation going on in the chat, because that's always really fun. And if you're watching this later, you can also share it, and make sure to like and subscribe. Here, we're supposed to ask for that stuff at the beginning, but so we had kind of an interesting topic, and I'm hoping that we get some people in the chat, because I feel like this would be a really good chat topic with a lot of the people that we have here usually. Dunning-Kruger. Okay, the Dunning-Kruger effect is really complicated language, but if you simplify the language, basically what it says is the less someone knows about something, the more competent they feel in that thing. And so the best example of this, I think, is parenting. The people with the best parenting advice are those who have never had a kid. The second group of people with the best parenting advice are those that had children 20 or 30 years ago and completely forgot what it's like when they're little. And so the interesting thing about that is that it's so very true universally on almost every topic. And there's a number of reasons, but when I mentioned this, Josh, I'm curious, why did this strike your fancy as a topic to discuss? What about it kind of stands out to you?
It's just familiar to myself in my own life. Like, I know I myself have fallen for, I guess, the Dunning-Kruger effect, like, in my own life. I think I was joking before we got recording that I don't know if anybody would get into professional art without a little bit of this.
Yeah.
Because generally, I know when I was a new student and I had just gotten my my BFA, I was like recycling a lot of the ideas and concepts that I had just learned like 4 semesters before, and had probably convinced myself that most of those ideas were my own, and felt like I really had like a strong grasp on illustration and graphic design, and that I could kind of take over the world, and went out and applied for jobs I had no business applying for, approached clients I had no business approaching, because literally these are clients that hired illustrators who were like seasoned famous illustrators, and I'm like, I'm this up and coming famous illustrator, so you should hire me, that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And only in retrospect do I like look back and realize how delusional a lot of that was, but helpful in a weird way, because I think if you don't have that a little bit trying to get into any field, you're going to have a hard time coming in, because you do need a lot of confidence, and you do need a lot of, frankly, like shamelessness when it comes to like self-promoting and getting your work out and trying to get clients and stuff like that. So oddly enough, this effect might actually be a benefit for people when they're entering fields, because if they know the reality of the fields, like now that I've been at cartooning for so long, it's almost like I realize like how many people are out there that are better than me. There's a lot, and how little I know, But yeah, I did feel like, okay, I'm equipped. I've got all the tools.
That's a really interesting take on it, because I've always considered the Dunning-Kruger effect to be super negative, because just like the old man get off my lawn attitude of like all these upstarts just like who know nothing. I just want to tell them, you know nothing, Jon Snow. But they like but that kind of blind eagerness is super valuable and useful to them. And I'd never really thought about that. I just know the more seasoned people are very frustrated with the attitude of like, oh yeah, that must be really easy or whatever. It also comes into play when you're dealing with clients and when you're dealing with other people who you're interacting with who don't understand. And I feel like anybody who doesn't know how something is done doesn't value that thing. And
Agreed.
so the value will increase. And I was talking to you recently about something that I used to do where I, as an art director, if I felt like there was a particular task where the C-suite was like, why is this taking so long? Blah, 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 blah. It seems super simple. All you have to do is like remove the background from that drum set. And I'm like, well, the drum set is almost completely chrome. And I'm losing my... I'm going to press this button. Sorry. It's good radio there. Okay. I thought that was plugged in.
No, so I'm following you.
Yeah. So it's almost completely chrome. And so it's like really, really difficult to remove the background. And so you have to go in and do it by hand. And so anybody who's ever clipped a background out of something knows how complex that can be. And the fact that Adobe continues to try to innovate and update that, it's a major task, and they still haven't nailed it. And a lot of the sneaks and previews and stuff in this recent Max is really interesting. But what I did was I took a video of one of my designers doing that, and I showed it to everybody, in the board. I just showed it to the board of that company, and I said, we're just going to watch this. This is the task that everybody is claiming is super easy. They didn't make it 30 seconds. They didn't make it 30 seconds through that video, because as soon as they realized, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about, I've been making this assumption, and the assumption is that it was super easy, they became educated, and all of a sudden they were like, oh, that's really, really complex. And so that's an interesting part about Dunning-Kruger, is that the ideas, when there's a lack of neural network on that topic, you tend to get the assumption of ease. But once you start to introduce that kind of neural network, and you get a richer neural network, you start to know more of how things function, and you're able to neurologically process the complexities of that task because of the new information.
Yeah, and I mean, I think another good example of it is like, and just using myself as like an example, like before I ever managed people, I was really judgmental of my managers, because if I were a manager, I'd blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I had this perfect idea of what the perfect manager was. And then you get in management and you're leading people, and it's really hard. And there are like weird things you have to do to try to keep morale high. And suddenly like things that I hated, like, department meetings and stuff like that, become really essential, because they work, and yet you can't see that they work when you're kind of on the ground. It's weird. Yeah. So like there's a lot of stuff that when I was like, for instance, whenever I've worked anywhere, I've always been the guy who, like, I hate the office birthday party. I'm not a big fan of like, let's all pretend to be happy and have cake. I've never been that guy. Yeah. But now as a manager, it's like I'm really encouraging that kind of thing. And it really is interesting how once like kind of the curtain's lifted and you kind of see the mechanics or have to live something for a little bit, your perception changes. With clients, I think that's totally true, because I think most people fancy themselves as designers, and most people fancy themselves as like having a solid grasp of color theory. And
I know what I like. I know what I like when I see it.
Yeah, and that like that statement alone is the Dunning-Kruger thing, it encapsulated, because who can't say that? Like everyone on earth can say, I know what I like.
Yeah.
That's not a statement. That's a non-statement. Right. But, it can feel like a real, like, individual creative thing to say. And I think that what's a good indicator of somebody who is starting to grasp color theory is somebody who says, I barely started to kind of get into color theory.
Yeah.
Like, I understand analogous colors, you know, I understand some of the crazy weird things on the color wheel, but I'm not quite like once you kind of crack open that Pandora's box, you realize like just how much you don't know. Another example is like I'm really into typography. I would never say I grasped typography
Right.
because it's like you crack open that can of worms and you realize this is kind of like a lifelong pursuit. It's not something that's going to be perfect. Um, Even kerning in itself has like a bit of a science to it, but it's not black and white. And I get better at it the longer I'm at it. But I think I would have thought prior to dipping into typography, I might have a better idea of it than I do now that I've dipped into typography. So I think it's definitely something that's fascinating, especially when it comes to clients, how much, you know, like a lot of people have kind of the idea that something's easier than it is, or that they kind of fully comprehend how something's done. And it does make me wonder, like, what things in my life do I apply that to? You know, I don't know
Yeah.
if you kind of have a similar thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think anything like this, there's a good takeaway. And I think it was Chris Oatley who said this, but I might be misdescribing that. It's you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. I think that's just a general rule because on the one side of Dunning-Kruger, you have the problem of overestimating your abilities, which can have some benefit into just blazingly going out and getting work that maybe you shouldn't get or whatever to start. But it also can be really frustrating in that the way that you're interacting with other professionals and things like that becomes really problematic. But on the flip side, beating yourself up about all the things that you can't do or don't know because you've now dove in and started to like understand and learn. I think that's just a good thing. Is you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. No matter where you are on that scale, you are exaggerating your skills either on the lack or on the plus.
Yeah, I mean, I always am a little skeptical if I meet a young artist who's claiming like they're the greatest, because
Yeah.
you're like, okay, now I want to see the portfolio, because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sincerely sure you aren't. In
Right.
fact, you're probably like really behind.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, you meet really seasoned guys like at the NCS. I'll meet guys who've been in the industry, like professionally worked for like massive clients, maybe even directed. Well, actually, I have met people there who've like directed like Disney films and stuff.
Yeah.
And you meet them, and it's always surprising how they're filled with humility. There's a couple guys that are cocky,
Yeah.
that are up there, but weirdly enough, none of them would say they're the best.
Right.
All of them will kind of be like, I'm okay, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
And but I did think that was interesting when you mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect, because like I've never actually used that term, and so I kind of read up on it, and I was noticing, I guess it originated in a psychology 101 class, and they kind of tested the kids to kind of self-assess themselves, like on how they would do in the class, and the least competent students marked themselves up by like 62% of what like their grade really should be.
Right.
And then the people who were really competent in the class like really underestimated their competence, because and they were saying the reason is because people who are competent at something get to the point of finding it easy, and the second you find something easy, you just kind of start to assume that anyone else doing it is going to have an easy time with that thing you have an easy time with, because
Right.
you've acquired that skill. And actually, I will say I've seen that in effect with teaching too. Like where when getting into teaching, I didn't think I'd be able to teach, and then you have students ask you questions that are like really like they just seem like the most easy basic questions,
Right.
and then you have and then I don't know, I remember that first semester just being like a real like memory jog, where it's like, oh yeah, when I was in college, like I really didn't know these things.
Right.
um And so you start feeling like, okay, well, I do have some stuff I can teach. But there's also the other problem of like sometimes because I've been at it for so long, I would kind of rush through something that I found really easy, and the students would get lost. And that's something I had to adapt and change the next semester,
Yeah.
because I was realizing like I was going too fast through stuff that I felt was really basic and easy, but I had to, you really have to constantly have this moment of remembering what it's like to not have known. Um, and then it helps you kind of pace yourself a little slower, which can annoy some of the higher performing students, but for the students that really need it, like it's invaluable. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I agree. I just know. I just think it's really important to understand what your mind is doing. There's another one that we could talk about on another episode, talking about neurological stages of development, and it's super interesting because your mind doesn't like fully develop until you're like into your like mid 20s is when you have all of the capability neurologically, but even then not all adults are using full functions of their brain as far as like being comfortable with cognitive dissonance. Like there are still people that like view things as black and white when there's like being uncomfortable with ambiguity or being comfortable with ambiguity. Those are all different stages of development. But one of the things that I've found is that and one of the reasons why I'm super fascinated in like how your brain works is if I understand what is going on, then it's no longer happening to me and I can be an active participant. And so kind of wherever you are in the Dunning-Kruger kind of scale there, if you understand where you're at, then you're able to kind of utilize it. So if you know that your overconfidence might be causing a blind spot, then you can be aware of that blind spot. And once you're aware of that blind spot, you will learn and it'll stop being a blind spot. Or if you're aware that that your imposter syndrome is probably driven by the fact that you're super experienced and becoming very good at something, and so Dunning-Kruger comes in and oftentimes causes you to think that you're less competent than you really are, the knowledge of that can be really helpful because then you can kind of bag and tag specific thoughts as, well, that's probably Dunning-Kruger and that's imposter and that's this. And so I always find that type of thing really, really useful, probably because I'm just in a constant fight with my brain.
no, I think that reading about psychology and the mind and how it works is always super important and enlightening, because it does open you up for blind spots. Like we had this discussion, I can't even remember how many ago, where we were talking about, it was one of those conversations that kind of ended up eroding into the what is art kind of discussion.
Right.
And it was high versus low art. And within that, we even started recognizing, like, while we were criticizing logical fallacies, we were committing them ourselves. And
Right.
to me, that's always fascinating and eye-opening, the fact that I'm vulnerable to cognitive bias, I'm vulnerable to logical fallacies. In a weird way, there's some that are just kind of inherently built into discussion itself,
Yeah.
just the premise we have to accept to kind of trust ourselves, to like observe and trust our own observations of reality. That in itself is a really illogical premise, and it's the one you have to kind of start on to even begin thinking. So it's like,
Right.
it to me, that stuff's not only fascinating, but it's super important. It's important in like marriages, in relationships, in business relationships, in art creation. Like for me, the Dunning-Kruger thing is a really good reminder for us as artists to kind of be slow to judgment, and for also clients and people who deal with artists to be slow to judgment, because what you consider like how many, I don't know, how many times in my freelance life have I gotten an email, well, this will be really quick.
Right.
And very often it's something that is not really quick.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing. So it's already starting off with this false assumption. And so let's say you do that really quick thing and it's not quite up to their liking. Well, it was really quick, so you can change it really quick, right? So there's these false assumptions that people kind of start off the gate with, and a lot of those come with, actually it's funny, but that does tie into assuming, and I have this whole huge thing on not assuming, especially when you end up in management. It's like you start, when you have to kind of step back and you're seeing kind of the cogs a little more, because when you're in it and you're working, it's like the cogs are all moving and your main concern is like the thing right in front of you. But when you're having to kind of think like long-term game plan to run an entire team to kind of accomplish like greater and smaller tasks, then you're having to step back and you start noticing this through line of the fact that that assumptions happen all the time, and that the majority of errors that happen in the workplace and disputes and everything all kind of fall from assuming and not confirming. So it's like, I've actually become a really annoying person whenever, like even in my own life, where it's like, you know, if I have to book a doctor's appointment or whatever, and I'm like, you know, well, when is it? And it's like, well, I'd assume, and I'm like, I don't want to know, like, okay, tell me that, like, confirm it, like, because I need confirmation so that I'm not making an assumption, because the second I make an assumption, I'm putting my idea in your head,
right?
And that's not necessarily what you're thinking or what your conclusion is going to be. I don't know, that's really rambly, but it's a fascinating kind of can of worms, and I think it's a can of worms worth dipping into. Especially, you know, I know a couple artists that are pretty stable, but most artists I know aren't the most stable people in the world. You know, I mean, we're the weird kid who kind of chose to draw in the corner when everybody else wasn't drawing, and so it's like, for us, like, because I think art is such an expressive activity, and if you're doing it right, you're being authentic, you're involved in some kind of active expression that's meaningful. And when you're in this business of making meaning, you know, it's good to be aware of like the psychological stuff that will inevitably come up when you start pouring that out. I mean, Cory, you even attested to that, like where you were saying you didn't have a lot of certain issues, and then you started making art, and all this weird stuff started coming out of the woodwork, and you're like, what's going on? Like,
what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's super interesting. Once you just start opening different parts of your brain, then there's stuff that comes with it. But yeah, so So Greg in the chat asks if I have read Predictably Irrational, which is interesting because he's the second person this week to mention that book to me. So that's definitely a book I've got to read. Yeah. So should we jump into the art check?
Yeah, let's rock it.
Okay. I'll go first this time. So as far as progress goes, I was on Artcasters with Scott Cirkland and you last night, and so I got a few of these done. So you're looking at Chun-Li as Spawn, Baroness from G.I. Joe as Powerpuff Girl, the Tick as the Lorax, the Max as Hellboy. I think those are the ones that I finished last night. So coming along, I've got about 2 or 3 more to go. It will take me a bit, but it's progressing. So
awesome. And it looks like it's getting there, and I know like some of it is being paced to match Inktober as well. So yeah. So my progress so far was let me see. I'm seeing like something that says air server.
Okay. My camera died, so I will now be a yellow square for the rest of the episode.
I love it. I'm talking to a yellow square. So okay, so anyhow, my progress was to kind of finish rough pencils for my page. And that's pretty much it. I mean, do you have that on the, like, as an image, or?
Yeah, there it is. There it is there. Let me scroll it for you. I forgot to scroll it before. So
no worries. All right. So so this page I've basically done all the rough pencils. The last panel was like a bit of a crowd scene in the classroom, and I'm going to add a little more detail and stuff on that bottom panel later on. But it doesn't seem to be showing that panel, so
Sorry.
No worries, man. So you guys can check it out on Instagram, and I will be doing tight pencils, so you guys will be seeing more of that later on. So yeah, that's pretty much my progress. The thing I did want to mention too, since you mentioned Artcasters, because that's where I got most of that done. But Nick Bernstein, one of our like listeners and shows up in chats for I think both shows, actually developed like a little program for us, which is insane. That's gonna like it auto rips audio from a YouTube video and then inserts a bumper that's a beginning intro and an extra, so that we can start turning like Artcasters into a into like a podcast, which was what we were discussing on Artcasters. So that's just like, I don't know, to me that was like the weirdest, most surreal and awesome thing I've experienced since we've started these things, these streams, because I'm like, we actually have like a really great group of people, like the kind of people who will just randomly agree to do I mean, like build software for us. Like it's insane. So anyhow, Nick Bernstein really made my day with that, and I think all of us, like Cory and Scott and I, were like really blown away by that and excited by it, because it's kind of neat to see a community kind of helping build something. And you know, for those who've been watching Art Check, it's like, you guys know this is kind of a work in progress, so it's kind of neat to see, like, you know, people who watch the shows who are kind of actually getting involved in this process. So
yeah, for sure, it is really cool. I was pretty excited. I'm always amazed by people that can just like, I'll just write a program for that. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm amazed and jealous, because I'm like, man, your monetary value in the workplace is much higher than mine. I'm sure. So,
challenges.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Challenges,
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, as far as challenges goes, not much. And since Wednesday, it's just been, it's kind of a crazy time at work, but you know, I've been able to. I'm feeling a lot better. So I have a little bit more energy and stuff. So I don't really have too many challenges. Halloween is coming up, so I'm spending a little bit more time on some things with the family than I normally do. But yeah, how about you as far as challenges go?
My main challenge is being sick. So today I got a couple freelance jobs that have been kind of wrapping up. They're for this client that I work for every year, who's like a long-standing client. Usually has me do a couple T-shirt designs, and just getting those done today was really helpful. But what bummed me out is, like, there was a Halloween party that the family went to that we go to every year, and I couldn't go because I didn't want to get all the kids there sick.
Oh yeah.
But on the plus side, I got some much needed rest, and so that's kind of my plan, is to kind of rest up and kick this thing. By the way, how's your ear stuff coming? Just out of curiosity.
We won't know anything until, you know, I'm done with this round of medications that they've got me on, but nothing has reoccurred. And I went through the full steroid round, so that's over, and now it's just there's 2 different types of antibiotics that I'm on. So, it's been okay. But yeah, I think I'm just, this is my 4th round of heavy antibiotics in a row, and so, like, I've just noticed that like food just messes me up. And I think it's because I've like killed all of the good flora and fauna in my body. So all the little gut bugs that are supposed to be helpful are probably dead, along with everything else that I've been nuking.
Yeah, so you gotta just start eating a lot of yogurt and rebuilding your gut biome.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's fine, and I haven't had anything resurface, and so that's good because I had kind of the three different abscesses in a row, one in each ear and one in my nose, all at the end. So anyway, so yeah,
It's too much.
it's weird. It's
That's
super
crazy.
weird. Yeah.
All right. So, what are your plans? What are your
So
plans?
my plans are I'd like to finish this by Wednesday, and so I'm going to get the rest of the characters done soon. So I've got let's see, Gwen Stacy, Spider Gwen as Ghost Rider, and then I've got a Harley Quinn, and I can't remember who Harley Quinn is mixed with. And there's a third. So I'm going to knock those three out. Hopefully, I'll get one or two of them done before Monday, and then the third done by Tuesday so that I can finish off the background by Wednesday and be finished on Wednesday. That's kind of my goal as far as plans
I
go.
love it.
How
I
about
love
you?
it, and I do think it's looking good. The pacing is working in your favor, I think.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
So my plans are to hopefully I'd like to get at least like three of the panels, rough penciled or tight penciled, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think those first few should not take that long because there's not as much adjustment. It's just kind of clarifying some of the lines. That last panel is going to be the beast. So.
Right.
So there's that, and then I'm hoping to kind of wrap up these freelance jobs. There's only two shirts I have left to do, and they're in the same style. So I went ahead and did one and sent it to the client just to make sure we're on the same page for the style and look. That way, if there's modifications, it's not modifying two; it's just modifying one, and then the next one will go 20 times faster for that. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, anyway, lots of technical difficulties tonight. Hopefully that won't affect the audio too much. But anyway, I have your image up and loaded now. So if you want to talk about that third panel, but that last one that spreads the entire kind of page horizontally is the one that Josh has been talking about. So
Yeah, my
that.
apologies too. I got a little thrown off by that too, and I need to be more on my A game when it comes to audio.
No, that's
um,
fine.
but it was weird because it's like you blipped out, and then so it's like from my perspective, there's like Cory, and then the screen just goes like yellow.
Right.
It was very strange. Um, but anyhow, so yeah, I really want to read this book too that Greg is recommending, and I want to read up more on the Dunning-Kruger effect because it's really fascinating, and I just it does explain a lot of people. Not to like harp on it too much, but it's fascinating to me because there's so many people I've met in my life who are just so inflated in their self-assessment when it comes to like certain topics, and this just kind of brings light to it where you're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. It is interesting. So I want to say for those of you that are watching this live and watching it later, get ready because we're going to be kind of ramping this thing up. And if you have any interest in doing something like this, I'd recommend it. And even if you're just like, I think it's too time consuming and I don't have time for it or whatever, I would just try it. And the reason I say that is you can do it once a week or you can do it 3 times a week. There's kind of 2 formats for that. But there's some huge benefits to it. And we're going to be starting its own YouTube channel, and it's gonna become a thing. And so we'd love as many people as possible to be featured on that YouTube channel. And so if you guys are doing this type of thing along with us, we don't want this to just be the Josh and Cory show. And so the more people that jump in, the better, which is one of the main reasons why we started doing this. I remember at the very beginning talking to Josh, and you were really excited about the potential for how this could help out people that are struggling to stay on task.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And like I think it's really important regardless of a show. But I mean, I think having a show just adds an extra layer of accountability. But as artists, and this is like an artist of any kind, like I would love to see writers jump in on this too, because I've met a lot of people who want to write and haven't written yet, who want to do things and haven't done things yet. And when you talk to them, it's kind of like that response of, yeah, I know, but yeah, I know what I should do, but, and it's great to have somebody to hold you to account, to actually make progress, moving forward on your own art or your own writing or whatever your goals are. Because without that accountability, those things could just end up being things you're saying, yeah, I know, but, and then you're on your deathbed, you know? Yeah. None of us want that. So it's like, to me, I think let's start getting some public accountability for making progress towards our overall goals as artists, and let's make a community out of it. And I agree with Cory. I think it's going to blow up. So you want to be in on the ground floor for sure, because, you know, like these kind of things, like the first in are usually, you know, the most visible. And so it's like, I would definitely jump in on it, for that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I have a request of anybody who knows Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. I'm trying a different format on my channel, and I just did a live streaming video on a technique that, or 3 techniques that are a little bit advanced. And so I'm just curious, any feedback that anybody could give me on those would be awesome, because if I get this set up correctly, it'll be way faster than the way I was doing it before, which means that I can actually produce more of that content rather than not, because I haven't done it in a while, but I have a lot of people that ask me about it. So if you want to go check that out on my channel, and let me know what you think in the comments of that video. Just let me know, hey, this is great, or nah, it's too rambly, I'd rather the polished stuff, or you went too fast, or whatever. Any tweaks that I could make on that would be interesting, because I'm kind of ramping something up for that. If you want to check out my work, go to korykerr.com, and you want to check out the podcast versions that are slowly coming out here, you can go to korykerr.com/48hr. Special thanks to No Saboteurs, Josh's band, for the intro music. And if you want to see Josh's stuff and the pages that he has done, you can go to quarterlystories.com. Also check out his comic on Tapas, and get the algorithm on Tapas really pushing that by interacting with it and sharing it and whatnot, because that's huge help that doesn't cost any money at all, but it's something that an artist can't do for themselves. So we will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Bye.